Well, thank you again. And as we end this first day of the Ottawa Greening Government presentation, I want to stray from perhaps the more overly analytical types of presentations that are a necessary part of events like this and draw more upon where I come from in my field of expertise. I'm not a government person. I'm a media guy. I've spent 20 years in media. I've had 20 years I started in radio. I've hosted television shows. Science and left brain analytics is not my strong suit, but what I do talk about is emotion and drive. I had an epiphany that created more of an environmental sphere a number of years ago, and I'll talk about that later on. But I had the opportunity to really advance this desire in 2008 when, along with some other people that are here today and in this room, I had the chance to receive training from Mr. Al Gore and Dr. David Suzuki as part of the climate, then it was the Climate Project initiative. In Montreal, we had over 200 Canadians trained by Mr. Gore to speak about climate change based upon the Inconvenient Truth documentary that Mr. Gore made so famous. People say it's quite impressive that I had that, and they wonder if it's actually true. And I do have photographic evidence of that, as you can see. There I am. In fact, actually, you can look, Natalie, who was here just earlier this afternoon, is there as well. Candace, who was just speaking, was in Ottawa. We actually have Edward Lim. Oh, you're in that picture too? Yeah, but you can't see me though. Well, see, I would have known. I would have pointed it. Yeah, that was an thing. Actually, I had this great shot with Mr. Gore, and then Dr. Suzuki got in the way, and I said, you owe me a better shot, so I did get a better shot with the doctor, and that's one of my calling cards and such. So it's been an emotional journey over the last 2.5 years. I've spoken to almost 20,000 people across the country, a lot of students, about this issue, which is near and dear to me. And it's about this place that's near and dear to me. And we might recognize that we may have talked about it once or twice. I think most of us, as far as I know, all of us call it home. And it's important to bear in mind this whole idea of sustainability. And what does sustainability really revolve around? I know we often talk about revolving around about balance sheets and initiatives and public policy and such, but really it revolves around this place. Because it's the home that we have. It's, last I know, the only home we are prepared to be upon. It's the only place that we really have an option to live on. And we have to bear in mind a lot what's been happening over the last 6 decades or so. I mean, we can go back as far as the Industrial Revolution, of course, but really the crux of the challenges that we're dealing with only began in the mid-20th century. It's from that time going forward that we began to realize the problems that we're facing and what we're dealing with. And we've become aware in the last decade or so about the challenges. Probably many of the jobs that some of you have today didn't exist that period of time ago because we knew we had to advance the cause. We had to get into this idea of sustainability. We had to get into this idea of what we were doing before was wrong. For too many years, we lived, and we still do today, largely in this linear economic model. This linear economic system where we have a model that's also based on one end with non-renewable and finite resources. If you know all about the story of stuff, of course, Annie Leonard is a master talking about this ridiculous linear system that we have and how we have to change it. Hence the sustainability initiative, this whole idea of living, existing, thriving, and passing on through sustainable practices. But of course, the challenge is sustainability itself has to be sustainable. So how do we deal with the sustainability of sustainability? Because when something is drawn to our attention, we can't help but begin to go big into it. We can't help but to be very strong with our realization and the desire to change. And sometimes that creates situations where we tend to weigh down things, we press down a little bit heavy. We tend to put a burden that is very strong, not saying it's not necessary, but we have challenges associated with that. What happens when we begin to bring these issues down to those who have to make the changes? It becomes a little bit cumbersome. And of course, as Mr. Ramrika talked about earlier, we have this whole idea about how corporations do see opportunity with crisis. And that's not a bad thing, because we should see opportunity in crisis as a method to change. But there's a fine line between, what is ethical and what is non-ethical. And then, of course, this is a challenge to the whole notion of keeping sustainability sustainable as well, because we become cynical of the whole concept and of the idea. There's a lot of public opinion surveys that have been out there that have talked about this issue of how, Canadian consumers understand the issues here. They want to make the right choices. But these same Canadian consumers are highly suspicious of virtually any green marketing claim because of the greenwashing that's happened, because of the heavy-handedness and the rather quick turnaround that industry has put on this issue of green and being green, because to them it's a different kind of green. Not that it's a wrong thing, but when you make false claims, there's another challenge. So we have all these things weighing down upon us. We have to think about all these things to do it right and what we have to be conscious of. The challenge, of course, is it weighs us down. We don't necessarily make the right choices. Does anybody golf? Anybody in this room? Are any golfers? You are? I kind of think of this in a way of a golf thing. People who watch golf on TV and the commentators say, this professional has the most natural golf swing. Well, there's nothing natural about a golf swing. It's a very unnatural action. And if you ever try to focus on all the things you learn in a lesson, you have to keep your arm in, your out, all these things, and head straight and keep on playing. Well, you never do it right. And that's the sort of same thing that's happening here with all the messages thrown at us and bogging us down. We just don't get it right. We don't make these right choices. And so really, a lot of times what we're seeing is people just have no other choice. They just run and hide. This becomes a bit too much. It becomes too heavy. And then we have to ask ourselves, are we risking the sustainability of sustainability? Through no necessary fault of our own, are we doing it wrong? Are we going too hard, too heavy, and causing this stagnation? Now, this is what we have to ask ourselves. Has our green gusto, has this desire to really move, really taken that social sustainability out of the sustainability movement? We never, ever want to get to a situation where what we're dealing with here is a fad or a trend. It's not just good to be green now. This is an issue of much greater consequence, and in reality, what we need to be talking about here is creating a movement and a whole new way of thinking. And in that transition, because our lives have been so entrenched in a way for so long, we have to be careful. We have to be somewhat deliberate in how we evoke change so that the desire to make these changes doesn't go away. And that's always a challenge. And mixed messages are part of it. We don't always deliver the consistent messages. With emotion, sometimes emotion causes, wrong decisions to be made. Sometimes the confusing nature of all the different opinions and ideas out there can impact upon the sustainability of sustainability. We have challenges when messages get too big and confusing and in too many directions coming at us. We have challenges of thinking, what is it we have to do? One example, of course, in the area of climate change, which is a great example, is with how environmentalists themselves realized they made a mistake in the beginning by talking only about global warming as the term, as opposed to climate change. Because really what we're facing here is a changing climate. And if you know, I'm not a meteorologist, but if you know anything about meteorology and climate, weather, which global warming is only one aspect of climate. Weather is the 3 and the 5 day forecast. It's not also inclusive of things such as barometric pressure and wind pressure and changing currents and atmospheric conditions. This is all about a changing climate, but we've been sending these confusing messages out for too long, and this is what begins to happen. So these messages get mixed. We say one thing, we say another. We have a confusing situation here where, again, we get stuck. People don't know how to keep sustainable if we're not sure exactly what messages are taking place. we have to bear in mind how sustainable is sustainability when we're throwing confusing messages. And sometimes through no fault of our own, the messages, while good intended, have unfortunate results in receiving in a different way. I can only imagine, it seems logical enough until there's double entendre. I just noticed the women are laughing more than the men. The men are just, I don't get it. What's that? It's moms, yeah. Guys, I don't get it. What do you mean? What's wrong with that? I don't get this thing. But this is what happens. There's so many examples. And sometimes messages are deliberately misleading. And history teaches us a lot about that. Think further back in the mid-20th centuries and beyond about the war, about misleading messages with tobacco, about what happened, how, and there's documented evidence about this, how the tobacco industry needed to confirm the consensus that there really is no consensus that tobacco is cancer causing. So they hire actors to become doctors and say, I smoke Camels, and there's commercials like this. And I could show you videos of, doctor, thank you for the cigarette, doctor. And it's all about this message. Because the weapon that we're dealing with here is a weapon of doubt. And for people like myself who are going out there trying to get the idea of thinking differently, and for all of you who try to embrace a sustainability message, we're fighting against the war machine that's well-funded, and their weapon is doubt. We don't like changing our habits. We don't like changing. If I told you have to lose weight, if I told you have to eat better, if I told you have to exercise more, if I told you have to communicate with your spouse better, if I told you had to get better grades in school, that's tough because we don't like change. And all it takes to stall change is someone saying, yeah, but I don't know if that's really true. I don't know if we really are needing to change. They don't have to have proof. High schools deal with this all the time. It's called rumors. Look at what rumors do. There's no fact in it. And they do this. They do this all the time. And then eventually what happens is we have no choice but to stop it and get wrong. Man, I'd hate to be the public service guy who had to deal with that issue. And not only that, they hire spokespeople to take to the media and to disseminate information in broad spheres which cause even further damage and challenges to what we're trying to do. And I do have a little quick video sample here of one of my favorite examples of this, and we'll have a quick gander just to show you what I'm talking about. Whoop, hang on. Can we get play on that? Does it stop? Where's our guy? Where'd he go? Huh? Just click them out? Nope. Wait a minute. Don't ruin my message. Where'd he go? It's really good. Trust me on this. You all know who Glenn Beck is, right? Yeah, right. Well, of course he's right in his own way. Just a second here. It's frozen. Can we play it? I know, but we got to see this. Come on. Now they want to know. Just press? Nope. Okay. Go back. Use the mouse. Yep. Oh, use the mouse. Oh, okay. And click. No. Click again.
This show has won so many science awards. Sometimes we get talking about highfalutin science, things like this, and people are like, what are you talking about? So let me just break it down. Carbon dioxide is basically this. Look how much pollution I just put out.
That depends on your definition of pollution, of course. I guess that's subjective. But come on. This is the kind of stuff that we have to go against. Yes, people, breathing is changing our climate. We just have to breathe. Come on. What nonsense. What garbage. But he has an audience. And any person who listens to him even that much makes our effort to keep sustainability sustainable, to keep climate change, the whole essence of change going, a challenge. And that is a problem. And now we get into the dissemination of message. They said, I'm a media person. I have a media consulting and production company. It was what I generally do. And if you ever go into the dictionary and actually look up the word media, what's the definition? The definition of media is just the plural of medium. That's all it is. All media has ever been, is a method to deliver a message. Most of us grew up in an era where media concentration and methods of delivering a message were a lot more confined. And there was greater ease at controlling and quantifying and performing due diligence on the accuracy of these messages. Nowadays, I'm a social media consultant. I speak to companies about social media. I don't even know half of these sites. And it's continuing to change. And the thing about this is anyone with access to a computer, we can get that information out there. No one's fact-checking it. No one's authenticating it. No one's making sure if what we're saying is actually correct, but it's being received. Hence, further challenging what we have to deal with. And that really leads to the question, what do we do? What do we do if the whole objective of transforming society to a sustainable one, where sustainability is sustainable, if we understand that we're really dealing no longer, say, in debating the scientific needs, we're no longer debating the science because the science really is clear. We're now fighting a war of spin. If we know this and we have objectives, how do we continue? How do we continue to pull forward and make the change ongoing? How do we make it not a trend, not a fad, but an entire movement and a whole new way of life? Well, it has, with any kind of change, it's a two-part process. There has to be two fundamental conditions there that allow change to proceed. Number one, of course, you absolutely, undeniably, unquestionably, you need to have a clear understanding and awareness that you need to change. You can't be questioning that anymore. You have to have that epiphany. You have to, if it's changing your way, you have to see that the poor scale is begging for mercy. You have to see that there's no more notches on your belt to expand to before you have, oh, gosh, I need to change. I think everyone in this room, at least I would hope everyone in this room, by the very nature that you being here, would understand that the issues before us are real, that we have had that epiphany, that we have to understand the model can't be that linear system anymore. There is an inherent, ongoing, and concurrent relationship between societal values and environmental advocacy and the economy as well. These are things we can't be linear anymore. In June of this year, I was down at in Detroit. I was at the global headquarters of Ford because I'm an automotive journalist as well, and I met Ed Begley Jr. You know, of course, he's a well-known lifetime environmentalist. And one of the first things he told me, and I actually have an interview on my website, that in 1971 he became an environmentalist. Why? Because it saved him money. It saved him money. He got that in 1971. I mean, trees are great. We need to hug trees. We need to love trees. But whatever. We can't have to worry about these people anymore who necessarily will want to bear us and hide us down. They'll continue to use the doubt, and they'll continue to use the denial because it's a difficult truth. Mr. Gore, I called it an inconvenient truth because it is inconvenient. It's a realism. It's a truth that, you know, we're the cause. It's our fault. And we're not necessarily in love with notions like that. That's why it's inconvenient, and that's why it's easy to run away from the truth. So, you know, we have to have that understanding. We have to know that it's true. But the second part of what I'm saying here, the second element of making this a realistic, ongoing, and fundamental change is then we have to have our own viable and sustainable motivator by which to propel that change. Now here's the variable, because that's not always going to be the same for everyone. What propels us to change might not be the same for me as it is for you. And there's a lot of reasons. There's professional reasons. It could be part of what you do for a living, this idea of propelling and making change. It could be for altruistic reasons. We always understand about the greater good. We understand that sometimes it's just within us because this is what feels right to us. It's part of our norms and our values. There are personal reasons by which we should change. We have our own. There are economic reasons. as Mr. Begley identified, it's not just about, saving the environment. It could be about saving money. It could be making money. When I speak to high school students, I say, what do you want to be in your career? What do you want to do? In only 45 minutes, the sun gives us enough energy that if we could capture it all, we'd have a year's worth of energy for the entire planet in 45 minutes. We just don't know how to harness, save it, and transfer it yet. We don't have that knowledge. Maybe that 15 or 16-year-old that I talk to might have that solution in him. It could be economic. It could be their future. It could be legacy. It could be ultimately, how do you want to be benchmarked and memorized and footnoted in history? How is this do you want to do? Now, I think because I'm here, and I'm saying there's many reasons, it's only fair that I tell you what mine are. Because perhaps in sharing my reasons, you might identify. I've had epiphanies in my life, as I mentioned. And perhaps one of the most profound, most life-altering, life-changing epiphanies I've ever had happened at exactly 9:34 p.m. on Friday, the 26th of July, 2002. I became a dad. That's the first picture ever taken of me with my eldest son. And I remember freaking out after hearing he was 10 pounds and 12 ounces and 21 and a half inches long and almost enrolling him in school that September. I realized that effectively, my life from that nanosecond forward till the day that I die, it's no longer about me. It changes. And that epiphany was reinforced again at 8:21 and 8:22 a.m. on Sunday, May 23rd, 2004, when my twin sons were born. My poor son Jacob had the pink blanket. That's how the hospital identifies twin A or twin B. I think it's still effective even today. It's just, poor child. He's always had a little bit of issues there. But again, I had yet another epiphany at 4:43 p.m. on Friday, September 4, 2009. I had my first girl. I got my girl. And now I have four motivating reasons, because you know what? It's not about me. Show of hands, please. Who here is a parent? Any grandparents as well? Yeah. Really? Man. Good on you. Wow. This is a government-based conference. Public policy, administering, creating, working with, is what you do. It's not who you are. When you go home at night, you don't talk to your children necessarily about metrics and return on investment and sustainable practices and pleasing your associate deputy minister. You talk about life. And it's important to remember these things, because each and every one of us, no matter what our professions are, we have an obligation. There is a Native American proverb that I think about every single day when I come out to events like this, when I speak with clients, whatever I do. I always remember that we have not inherited this planet from our ancestors. And that's me circa 1970. My mom loves that picture. But instead, we're only borrowing it from our children. We're not beneficiaries of this planet. We're only borrowers. And you have to ask yourself the question, who do we think we are? What right do we have to have been living a myopic, short-term way of thinking these past 6 decades? How entitled have we suddenly become? How does it not matter anymore what's going on? When did it get to be that the consequences down the line don't matter? I suck at science. I think I got 51 in grade 11 physics, but I know the universal law of science that for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. And this abuse that we've taken as great liberties with this place, in how we live and how we conduct our policies and how we make our laws, has a consequence. And if part of what you do needs to be propelled by who you are, then by gosh, we have to do it. we have to keep in mind that the greater good is far more important than the perceived greatness of having goods. And it's also a very appropriate message to keep in mind at this time of year, as we have Black Fridays and Cyber Mondays and consumption crazy days. How much bling do we need? Do our kids really need that new iPhone 4S when the iPhone 4 Why will people wait overnight in line to buy a new phone when they won't wait 15 minutes in line to go vote? What's wrong with what's happened to our way of thinking? And as public policy administrators and applicators, you have a vital role to play in that. And you know what? Change is happening because too many of us now, and more happening every day, we stood up. We've said enough. We're changing the paradigm where it's no longer a society of entitlement, where somebody has got to solve the problem for us. It's one of ownership. But the problem is ours. And within our own abilities and capacities, we have the opportunity here to make those changes. We have it. And we have to keep standing up. We have to win. We have to speak louder than the doubters. We have to win the arguments. We have to keep this going. And changes are happening. You see it in the corporate world. We've had examples throughout the day of what's happening. We've seen what happens. You can see, I've been in the Chevrolet Volt, an electric car. It's an amazing vehicle. I still have a video review on my site about that. There are corporate boardrooms. They realize that making money. But you still deal with issues. You all know the issue with the sun chips, right? The biodegradable bags. You know the whole controversy about why they sort of pulled back on that? Because people complain that this biodegradable bag made too much noise. It's a chip bag. You don't put silencers on your chips. I mean, like, it's too noisy, so we got to stop. And Sun says, well, we can't annoy our customers. Come on. We have to fight those arguments. And changes are happening. I mean, look, the Vatican. The Vatican is building solar panels. They get it. In fact, I know, for example, that the Vatican has made it known that they are hoping to become the first independent nation state to become completely carbon-free. Now, I know they have a couple of advantages. They're very small, and God is on their side. But it's an example of what can happen. Because we have to realize that not only is sustainability good public policy, but it's just the right thing to do. Being green is cool. Being green is what we have to do. Being green is what we should do. And for those who think that it can't happen, for those who feel that it's much too difficult, I have photographic evidence that it's not. And this, by the way, is also photographic evidence, by the way, for in case you're curious, that the Toronto Maple Leafs will not only make the playoffs this year, but win the Stanley Cup. So just, it's there. I can't deny it there. We can achieve these things because we have to remember, as I said, this is our home. It's the home we were born into. It's the home we will leave. It's all we have. And when you're thinking about your performance evaluation in your jobs, think about this final thought that I'll give you. We will always, at some point in time, be evaluated on how we lived our life. At some point in time, someone is going to ask us, how did we live our dash? What does that mean? Very simple. No matter where you come from, what part of the world, what nation, what cultural group, when we leave this earth, there's always some universality as to how we are remembered and marked. There's usually a stone or a marking at some point. And there is always, you will see, on one side, the year that you're born, and on the other side, the year that you pass. And in between that is a dash. How did you live that dash? That dash is every thought you've ever had, every word you've ever spoken, every breath you've ever taken, every conference you've ever attended, every policy you've ever implemented, every argument you've ever thought about, every trip you've ever made. Every single thing in your life can be encapsulated when someone asks, how did you live your dash? And that's a performance metric that we have to think about when we're doing our jobs, when we go home, when we speak with our families, when we go for our weekend trips, when we do anything we do with our lives. Every single action is going to be understood as to be part of that dash. For me, I made the conscious decision, and I promised it to my children, that by God, when my stone is etched, and on one side it says 1969, and on the other side it says 20 whatever, I don't want a dash. I want a plus sign. Because those years in between, they have to matter for something. They have to. It's too important. It doesn't matter what your boss says about your job, because again, your job is what you do. It's not who you are. And that's my call of action to you. When you all go out for dinner tonight and you talk amongst yourselves, ask yourselves the question, how are you living your dash? What can you do better? What do you have to think about? Because you can't pay it lip service 2 weeks before your time comes. You have to think about it today and every single day of your life. And if you have any further problems in thinking about this or how to ask that question again, my contact information is there. I'd be happy to come out and see you wherever you are. I thank you for your time. Good day and God bless.